There are more slaves around the world today than ever before in history. According to the Trafficking Victims Protection Act, domestic minor sex trafficking involves the recruitment, harboring, transportation, provision, or obtaining of a person under the age of 18 for the purpose of a commercial sex act. Involuntary servitude affects millions of people, particularly women and children, every year. Not many know what is being done to prevent or end this state of being. The trafficking victims suffer not only from physical abuse, but emotional turmoil as well. There are many different components that make up sex trafficking as a whole, but the main topics that the public should be more aware of are the causes of trafficking, the physical and mental trauma the victim suffers, and finally, what's being done to combat the trafficking industry. To begin, there are many causes involved in how a person becomes a victim of involuntary servitude. It can be split up into two major factors, local and international causes. These can then be divided further into social, economic, and cultural cases which can pressure the victims into slavery. According to the United Nations, components such as poverty, oppression, lack of basic human rights, civil unrest, and many more lead parents and children into a vulnerable state of being. The traffickers take advantage of these scared individuals and sometimes trick or force them into a life of slavery. The hope for a better life leads to desperation for most parents, so they unknowingly give their child to dealers. A lack of education is another key component in international countries. Limited opportunities for both women and children, especially in third world nations, are also a primary cause. There are many factors that lead to human trafficking, but the key factor is that women and children who are vulnerable states of being are being exploited by these dealers for sex and forced labor. This then leads to many consequences the victims will suffer for the remainder of their lives. As a result of becoming a target, the individual endures both physical and psychological trauma while being a sex slave. Researchers Brunvinsky and Surratt state that interviewing both past and current victims is difficult because of fear of being tracked down and punished or killed by former captors. They said that they had to consider how they could ethically and responsibly access such respondents without compromising their confidentiality, anonymity, and right to privacy. Victims have been broken by traffickers so that they have complete control over them. Traffickers use the term breaking in to state how they force women and children to do drugs and how they physically beat them so that the victims no longer has the will to fight back or have hope for freedom. Many victims then suffer from PTSD because of their time in captivity. Many are also at risk for STIs and pregnancy because of being pressured to perform unsafe sexual acts. Many suffer at the hands of not only one abuser, but at the hands of the clients as well. These women and children are treated like animals, therefore do not have the basic rights of freedom or a happy lifestyle. Because of how horrible these acts are, many are fighting to both end the industry and provide care for the victims and their families. For that reason, many groups and organizations are coming up with legislation to combat and punish those who participate in the forced slavery of women and children. For example, the International Justice Mission and the National Human Trafficking Resource Center Hotline are two primary groups that are working towards ending involuntary servitude. According to the FBI Civil Rights page, the result of the 2000 Trafficking Victims Protection Act, law enforcement was given the ability to protect international victims of human trafficking through several forms of immigration relief. This means that they can offer temporary legal status for witnesses or victims in potential human trafficking investigations. This act was the first federal law within the U.S. to address human trafficking. While this was a major step forward for ending slavery in the U.S., many victims abroad are in need of legislation. The UN and other non-government agencies are working together to come up with more legislation to punish those who exploit the victims and to help provide protection and resources for them as well. To summarize the key lessons, human trafficking can be generally defined as people smuggling for forced labor and or commercial sex acts. The main components that make sex trafficking are the causes, the physical and mental consequences the victim suffers, and the fight to end trafficking everywhere. Poverty and limited opportunities are two main factors that lead someone into becoming a target of a trafficker. These women and children then suffer physical trauma, which leads to rape, STIs, and at times death. They also suffer from addiction and PTSD because of the turmoil they were put through during their time in captivity. Many organizations are working to end the industry, but the need for public awareness and to help officially stop trafficking is at a greater height than ever. Anyone has potential to become a victim, someone you may know, or even yourself could be targeted by a dealer. It's up to us to push our government to make more laws that provide protection for the victims and harsher sentencing for the abusers. It's our duty to fight those who are in need and suffering to make a difference in the world, even if it's just one person's life to save, and that makes all the difference.